Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. They're still at it, playing the sad violins for someone who they know is a mass murderer, someone who committed his crime on the 4th of July, no less. But rather than an across-the-board condemnation from the white media, instead, we're hearing a sob story that he came from an unstable home. And not surprisingly, it turns out that there was all kinds of violence and abuse going on there. The killer's parents were apparently in some sort of abusive relationship. Domestic violence run amok. The killer's father claimed that his partner had been hitting him with screwdrivers and even a shoe. The family had fallen on hard financial times, so hard that their 2 houses were being foreclosed on. 2 houses. 2. Look at the lengths the white media is going to try to drum up some sympathy for the parents of the killer. A mass killer. They lived with this creep. They saw what he was doing. They were the ones who called the police when he said that he was going to kill everyone. And yet I'm told I'm supposed to be feeling sorry for them. We should feel sorry for them because they're going to lose their 2 houses. Well, their son's victims lost their lives. And if someone's finances get bad, then that means it's okay to go on a kill spree? Apparently. Dysfunction is never a good thing. The white media, however, never mentions that when talking about a black person accused of a heinous act of violence, by the way. And apparently one of the killer's elementary school teachers had said that it was strange that the parents didn't pick their kids up on time, that the parents seemed to be uninvolved. Even if this is all gospel truth, my question is, so what? Does it matter? Really? Does this mitigate the killer's behavior? Does this make this any better? Why this obsessive-compulsive need by the white media to always humanize these mass killers? Well, only certain mass killers, by the way. The white media narrative is clear. Whenever one of these mass killers goes on a kill spree, well, there was something deeply wrong with him. A chaotic home life, unstable parents. Why, there has to be something wrong with him or his environment, because this isn't normal. Well, as we've seen with Ethan Crumbley and others, this is what goes on in the suburbs. And of course, there's no chance that this will be racially pathologized at all. In other words, the kind of color-coded coverage that the white media does against black people all the time. Because rather than talking about the family's domestic violence issues, the white media should have been talking about the father's arrogant stance in the face of his son's mass murder. Because not only is the killer's father not ashamed of the part that he played in raising this little monster and facilitating a mass murder, Robert Crimo Sr. is actually proud. As he put it, "I've been here my whole life, and I'm gonna stay here, hold my head up high, because I didn't do anything wrong." He actually said that. First of all, they described the killer as a shooter. He didn't just shoot some people, he murdered at least 7 of them. He's a killer, not a shooter. Secondly, the headline shouldn't be any nonsense about how the killer's family was in turmoil. The headline should read, "Highland Park killer's father proud about helping son get guns used in mass murder." The father of the killer's not just unremorseful, he's absolutely proud. And holding his head up high? Really? What the hell does he have to be proud about? Too many in the dominant societies see these acts of mass violence as showing their power. To many of them, there's a culture of the gun being power. But of course, what good is power if you never use it? This guy is proud, and his son paralyzed an 8-year-old child and wounded the child's mother. He's proud of himself while his son was shooting little children and their mothers. Well, I guess he really didn't do anything wrong, except not put his demonic child in therapy after he tried to commit suicide, and no therapy after he threatened to kill people. And there was the time that he helped his son get the gun owner's permit, and help him buy multiple weapons while not demanding that money go to keep a roof over their heads. Oh, they got money to buy 5 guns, but not enough money to stay on top of the mortgage. See, to people of a certain culture, this is all just some sort of sick game. Ethan Crumbley's parents were laughing and joking, this after his teachers said that they knew he was preparing to carry out a mass murder. They were saying, "This kid is clearly getting ready to do something. He's sitting here telling us what he's going to do." And this after Ethan told his parents what he was going to do. They had a doggone parent-teacher conference with him. This need to remain in the land of make-believe and denial, even after clear, incontrovertible evidence, that's the problem here. And we also see this same psychopathic delusion from the white media as well. When talking about certain criminals, the narrative is that the perpetrator is not responsible for their behavior, and that they're really good people. Blame their circumstances, but don't blame them. The The white media has its narratives. It's part of how they do social programming. When talking about black people, it's always crime as some sort of inherent dysfunction. Like when they talk about drugs. Whenever they're talking about black people and drugs, it's always a criminal justice narrative from the white media. Dangerous drugs, dangerous black dope fiends, and even more dangerous black drug dealers. But when talking about meth, however, the white media excludes drug dealers from the conversation altogether. We all know about Freeway Rick Ross and other black drug dealers who the white media has made famous, but can you name even one meth dealer? We're talking about an epidemic far bigger than the crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s, and yet you don't know of any meth dealers, do you? White media is not trying to make any sort of celebs out of them. And when talking about meth addicts, the narrative isn't that they're all criminals. It's that they're victims of circumstance, caught in the grip of forces far stronger than themselves, and the white media doesn't mention the houses that they burglarize, or the people who they rob to support their habit, or the children they neglect because they only care about getting high. Instead, it's only about how they need treatment, not incarceration. Well, as we've seen so many times before, the white media uses the exact same color-coded narrative even for mass murderers. All this white media sympathy for someone who shot a child, an elementary school kid. He paralyzed a child. And that kid's going to be living with the consequences of someone else's actions for the rest of his life. And yet the white media is so determined to maintain their narrative that mass killers are innocent victims of circumstance that they're actively protecting this guy and trying to gain sympathy for him. What kind of culture is so obsessed with guns that they will proudly buy them for a child who tried to commit suicide, who threatened to kill people, even his own family, who would be buying guns when their home is in foreclosure? What kind of culture is that? What kind of media culture tries to get sympathy for someone who's proud of having helped facilitate a mass murder? Just like they did with the Las Vegas mass killer, they didn't talk about how friends and neighbors feared him, or he was a quiet person who other people found disturbing. Instead, the white media's entire coverage of the Las Vegas mass murderer was all about how he was a businessman and he had some money and property. You would have thought that this was some sort of human interest story the way they were talking about him. The white media talked about the Las Vegas mass murderer's business success and how apparently he had some property and such. They talk about that long before they got around to the part about how he murdered 58 people. Because the white media understands how important it is not to stigmatize people, well, certain people that is. When you begin to emphasize the crimes that the meth users and meth dealers commit, then you make it into a criminal justice issue, and the white media doesn't want that. Locking up the mass killers wouldn't fit the white media narrative either. At least they don't want that to be the main focus. Let's talk about the victims. Let's get hearts and feelings into this. But we don't want to be making it where people are asking, what can we do with the laws to make sure this doesn't happen again? They do this deliberately. A black person is harmed or even murdered by the police or just some white supremacist on the street, and the white media doesn't care about the killer. Instead, the entire story is about whether the victim had a criminal record, or what did they do to deserve being killed, or, oh, this is probably just some tragic confluence of events. We have to wait for all the facts to come out. Well, there's various laws that just make it so difficult to prosecute. It's very, very difficult to prove in court, don't you know? And, oh, there's some evidence over here and maybe an eyewitness. Or, well, it's just so difficult, and that's what the entire narrative is. Black person gets killed by one of these white supremacists, and it's all about how, well, it's going to be an uphill climb to get this proven in court, so you shouldn't be expecting a conviction. And even if so, you shouldn't be expecting any prison time. The white media are proud PR agents for whomever harms a black person. Whatever the defense for the white supremacist killer happens to be, the white media will gladly explain how, well, this is very well rooted in law. It's a very strong, well, here's what it's based on, and this is why it's rock solid. The white media does that deliberately to condition the public as to what their response should be whenever a black person is harmed or killed by some white supremacist with or without a badge. The white media's sympathetic coverage for the Highland Park mass murderer's parents and for the killer himself, that's a flip side of the same white media coin. They make it a point to show sympathy for these mass killers and to show contempt for the black victims of white supremacist violence. And then, after all that, people actually wonder why this keeps happening over and over again. Robert Cremo's father isn't the only one who ought to be ashamed. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Ron Howard, Tanya Montagut, Reasonable Dude, Daryl, and Salim Muhammad. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.